So this is a participatory sermon. And it's actually a singing participatory sermon. So I'm going to sing a piece and then you're going to repeat it right back to me, okay? Yes? Yeah. Are we okay? Okay. You are loved, you are worthy. You are loved, you are worthy. You are loved forever so. Okay, so every time we get to a page that looks like this with an amazing rainbow drag queen, yes, thank you, we're gonna sing that together, okay? Because any conversation that we have about sin and about forgiveness needs to be rooted in our belovedness first. So, story time with Pastor Mallory. Forever So, written by D.C. Sills, who actually is a classmate of mine from Iliff. They wrote a children's book, and it's lovely. From the tip of your head to the bottom of your toes, there's one thing you should always know. No matter how old or how far you go, you are loved, you are worthy, and will be forever so. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. From lash to heel and all parts in between, the parts people see and those that go unseen, there's a light within you that's meant to shine, not just at night, but all of the time. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. From the inside out and the outside in, each day is a day to begin again. Make each day better than the day before, and go to sleep each night, ready to wake to one more. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. From your brain to your soul, if there's ever a time that you don't feel whole, like something is missing and your shine burns low, be open to others and believe when they proclaim that they will lift you up and share their flame. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. There will be times that you feel that you're the odd person out. The world will leave you filled with questions and doubt. Are you enough? Are you too hard to love? Believing in a devil below, wondering if there is a God above. Hold tight and know that from lash to heel, from head to toe, you are worthy and loved forever and always. And some days will be high, others will be low, but together we will all continue to glow. Right against the sky, leaving love in our wake, all working together to make our world a better place. It all starts with me. It all starts with you, knowing for sure this one simple truth, that from lash to heel and head to toe, we are all worthy and loved, and it will be forever so. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. The end. sin. It feels like it's the antithesis of this book, right? Anytime we talk about it, that idea of create a clean heart in me, O God, and renew a right spirit within me seems to say there's something broken about us, right? Larger Christian theology points to this idea that there's something unworthy, that God has to work really hard to love us, and we need to do our own groveling and belly crawling to be good enough for God. And so as good, like, progressive Christians, we're like, well, that's not right. And so then we're like, well, let's just not say the word sin and ever deal with it again. Right? We look at passages like this Matthew text and go, oh my goodness, if God is supposed to be an analog to the king in this scenario, and it ends with someone being handed over to be tortured, that is not a great look for God, right? Yeah, not really the God that I want to be in relationship with. If I'm afraid that if I mess up, then I'm, going to get handed over until my torture pays my debt bill. It doesn't scan, right? It just doesn't work, right? But the passage immediately before this Matthew text in Matthew 18, Matthew 18 is chock full of good relationship advice, right? So at the very beginning of Matthew 18, we have this formula for how we're supposed to deal with conflict in community, right? So someone ticks you off somehow, and you go to them and you're like, hi, that was really painful for me, whatever interaction we had. And then if they hear you, then your relationship is restored. You can figure out what it needs to be restored, and then the issue gets to be let lie. If they're like, whatever, I liked it and I'm going to do it again, or any range in between, and they're not accountable, then you take another person from the body of faith and you come to them and you're like, hey, no, what you did was really kind of messed up. And then if they hear you at that point, then great. And if they don't, then you bring them in front of the whole church and say, hey, that was really jacked up. And then if they hear you then like, again, relationship can be restored. And if not, then, quote, we're supposed to treat them like the sinners and the tax collectors, which is interesting, right? Because throughout the Gospel of Matthew, tax collectors come back to Jesus, right? And so you can be a part in relationship, it's maybe someone you don't want to spend a lot of time with, but that relationship, there is an open door, right? That when people repent, if they ever do, then that restoration, that opportunity for restoration is never taken from them. It's just, you're not throwing your time and your energy down that black hole, emotional black hole anymore, basically. So then we move from there, and then Peter, who I love, Reverend Dr. Anthony Scott referred to Peter as the cussin' and the cuttin' saint, which I can get behind because most of the time I feel that way. He's like, okay, so how many times am I supposed to forgive someone? And Jesus is like 77. Depending on the translation, it could be 70 times 7. So like 77 or 70 times 7, like those are like orders of magnitude different from each other. But it's a lot, right? If you're like that petty and you're counting the number of times that you have forgiven someone, kudos, I guess. Like, but the idea is more times than you can count, right? And if you're familiar with kind of how numbers work, 7 is completion. So 7 times 7 is like extra completion, right? And so it's like all the time, basically, is kind of the underlying message of this, that door to relationship shouldn't necessarily be closed if someone is asking for forgiveness. And then right after that 77 comment is this story. So it's told in this really like overblown kind of scenario where denarii is the daily wage of somebody. So that's like not a whole lot of money. And 10,000 talents is like more money than most of these folks would ever see in their lifetime. So the magnitude of these is really, really different, right? So here's this insurmountable debt. And then you have this king who is willing to forgive this debt. And one of the things you have to understand about like slavery at the time, like why he's like, the king is settling accounts with his slaves, which is not like chattel slavery as we would understand it. It's more like a bond servant, right? So like bonded laborers, or where you use it to work off a debt, which was, I won't go into all of the history of the United States. Like, the white people got to get out of debt with their labor, and then Black folks didn't. But slavery in Jesus's time would more have looked like bond slavery. And there was this idea that after a certain amount of time, those debts were forgiven. No one stayed in slavery for generations and generations. So when we talk about slavery in this context, it's a little bit different, not excusable, but different. So then here's this insurmountable debt that in theory, this king had that money to lend this person. And, it didn't even seem necessarily that it was a tough sell for the king, right? That the person went to him and said, like, don't do this, like, have pity on me. And the king was like, yeah, okay. So when you're talking about like, I don't know, $1 million, like someone with enough, financial security to be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, you don't have to pay that back. Your life, your freedom, your ability to be in a relationship with your community is more important to me than this amount of money, right? And then you have, the flip side where this person who has received this amazing gift, right? If you, my analogy for this is if you're in my age bracket, student loans, right? If there's the weight that got lifted or might get lifted if the current administration is actually successful with their student loan forgiveness, there's a lot of us who are like, oh my goodness, this would be this weight off of my shoulders, right? The amount of relief of not having the psychic weight of this debt on you anymore. And then he turns around and he basically shakes a guy down for $10, essentially, right? And so there's something going on there, right? It has this hierarchical, really violent text, but there's a relational subtext that I think is really important. Rooted in our belovedness, rooted in our ability to receive forgiveness and grace, to ask for it and to receive it, God's door is open to that. God's door is always open to that. It doesn't matter how much guilt you're carrying, you are loved forever so, right? That's the given, right? That's the thing that they're trying to get to. And as we try to treat other people as God treats us, suddenly, wait, if I'm not rooted in my own belovedness and I don't see you as also beloved, then I'm going to hold this grudge against you and shake you down for $10, right? And then I find it really interesting that it's outside parties, other servants who are like, what the heck? Why is it like that? Right? Why did this person who received so much grace turn around and try to take the very thing that they were given from their fellow. And I get to thinking about the ways that we do that, right? The ways that if I got mine, I don't care if you got yours, right? I can feel loved and worthy, but only if someone else feels worse than I do. It's a head scratcher, right? Because when you've received grace, grace being getting what you don't deserve or not getting what maybe you deserve, right? When you receive grace, it's life-changing. That weight off your shoulders allows you to breathe easier. There's literally a physiological thing that happens when that forgiveness comes. You start to wonder, maybe I can be beloved again. Maybe I actually do have a place in this community if I am brave enough to not let my guilt bar the way. But then the tough thing is allowing someone else to receive that same kind of grace, right? There's reasons we get into debt, right? There's reasons that we did the bad thing, right? The confession this morning talks about it. I was tired, I was hungry, I was angry, I wasn't resourced. There's ways that we can talk our way out of our own way that we showed up in maybe not the most pro-social way, right? But then someone else has that same kind of story, right? I think about the folks who spent time in our building this week. The folks we hosted are people who wouldn't be able to go into the high barrier shelters. There was another church also who there was an altercation between two homeless people the last time they did a warming shelter. And so those people were barred from ever coming back to their pop-up shelters. There was something that they did that they were no longer allowed to be in a place to get warm. This population has decided that these people cannot be among us. Colorado Springs literally pushes homeless people out to the outskirts through sit, stand, lie ordinances and boundaries around where people can loiter. We call it an urban camping ban, right? But who's urban camping? People who literally may not be able to pay their actual debts. And what I saw Tuesday night when we opened our doors was an embodied understanding of what grace means. They came in and they said, "Is this for real? You're not keeping me out. You're not going to kick me out. I am good enough to receive this care and this love." And the answer is yes. These beds are for you. This food is for you. It's here if you want to be here. We are not keeping you out. An average of 58 people stayed in our building over Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Rooted in our belief that they are loved forever so, right? Our homes are a gift from God. Some people don't have them right now. We do. Who are we to say you don't deserve to be warm, right? We lived out the underlying lesson of this parable is that there are things that keep us from being in relationship with one another. There's guilt and there's shame and there is actual wrongdoing, right? And also grace abounds in relationship. And that grace, when it comes, can be life-changing. And gratitude. That was the main emotion of the people. Gratitude and unbelief. They couldn't believe that a church wasn't asking questions about whether or not someone was worthy to be warm in our building. There were tears when someone said, "Can I have another snack?" And people said, "Yes, of course." They were living on a starvation diet of love. This parable, I believe, lets us think about that starvation diet of love, right? Things were as they were. Someone was carrying a heavy debt. It takes courage to go to someone and say, "Can I be forgiven?" And God's answer is always yes, that there is love and life and freedom for you for the taking. And then the cautionary tale is when we don't offer that back to our fellows, right? That this cycle of grace and forgiveness and love can be ongoing. And it's so powerful when it is. When we put our feet and our granola bars where they matter, and we say, "You are loved forever so." We're getting ready to enter the season of Lent. It's not everyone's favorite season because it's the time where we think about sin. It's a time when we often think about separation. It's a time when we think about spiritual practices. It's a time for deep contemplation. And there's a prevailing feeling that it's the time where the church beats you up because you're a bad person, right? You're not bad people. The contention is that no one is, right? We're people who make mistakes. We're people who choose division and who choose to close our door to the abounding love that is available to us. That relationship and care, that nourishment in community is available to you. That God's door is never closed. But we also can't pretend that we can be the arbiters of every good thing, right? We're not actually any better or worse than anyone else. And sometimes it takes setting aside 6 weeks to look at the places that are painful for us, the places where we have been the ones to shut that door, right? On someone else and on God, right? I feel for this servant, like he didn't get it. That this gift is one to be passed on, that we can always draw the circle wider. Sin is that which separates us from God and from one another. It's the human condition, but not the way that you think, right? God's door is always open. We are loved forever so. It's us that closes that door, who says, "I'm too whatever to receive the love and the care that's available to me." There were stories of people who didn't feel like they deserved a shelter this last week. There were people who maybe came for a little while and then didn't feel like they deserved to take up a bed. It's a burden to feel like you don't deserve your place in community. But this parable is that this love is for everyone. Forgiveness is for everyone. A place at the table is for everyone. And it takes work. Forgiving people who hurt us isn't easy, right? That's the spiritual Olympic medalist, right? To pray for the people who hurt you, to love your enemies. And also, when we invest in that, it's transformative for both people. And so as we enter this season of Lent, our theme is what happens in the wilderness. Feeling separated from one another and separated from God can be a wilderness time. And so we explore together some of the painful things that happen in the wilderness, and yet God is always there in the wilderness, providing something unexpected, an open door, a giving hand, nourishment. So as we cross this threshold on Wednesday, may you be rooted in your belovedness and the belovedness of the people who really tick you off. May we extend that grace as we journey together through this upcoming church season. So one more time. You are loved, you are worthy, you are loved, you are worthy, you are loved forever so. Amen.